Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in the late 1980s in Memphis, Tennessee. Not much is known about her early life. She is the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass from Madison, Alabama. Shanynthia was a slim, beautiful brunette with curly hair as a child. Shanynthia was a multi-talented person. Her creative spirit was evident in her songwriting abilities, which helped her become a local celebrity. Shanynthia also has a keen eye for fashion and photography, attends church regularly, and spends time with her family. Shanynthia seems well-rounded and full of promise for a bright future. Shanynthia met Derral Clayton when she was 14 years old. They became close friends. As they grew up and graduated from high school, their friendship turned into love. Shanynthia and Derral often spent time together. In 2008, Derral was accused of assaulting a woman, albeit unintentionally, which led to charges being filed against him. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. Shanynthia and Derral did not get married, but they decided to live together as a couple. In 2008, they had a son named Kason. Shanynthia took on a motherly role, not only to her own son but also to Derral's 2 children from a previous relationship. Shanynthia was a devoted mother and caring partner, which made her special to those around her. Although Shanynthia's relationship with Derral did not last long, to Derral, Shanynthia remained a loving wife and mother. Her life took a new turn when Shanynthia married Martin Gardner, the man who brought her joy and gave her a stable life. Shanynthia won Martin over with her kindness, love for children, and gentle nature. Their relationship developed quickly, and in September 2013, they decided to start a life together, moving into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. Their wedding marked the beginning. Shanynthia and her husband Martin started their family with the arrival of their first child, baby Derral Gardner. Their family grew as little Saya Gardner was born in 2014, followed by 2 more girls, Savi and Yahzi. Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to a child from her previous relationship, creating a busy and happy home. Shanynthia prioritizes her family's health and also enjoys her part-time job at the Children's Hospital. Additionally, she supports a charity center that focuses on raising funds to support children. Her compassionate nature fuels her passion to dedicate her life to helping others. On July 1, 2016, Martin had a phone conversation with Shanynthia around noon, as she was getting ready to watch a movie with their children. The couple were chatting quietly. Shanynthia suddenly lost control and grabbed a kitchen knife. She walked into the living room, where she brutally attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yahzi, without any apparent reason or provocation. The innocent child, unable to defend herself, was tragically killed at the hands of her mother. The eldest child, a 7-year-old boy named Kason, witnessed the horrific scene. Too young to understand the situation, the boy ran away from home. Shanynthia, still armed with the knife, pursued her son out of the house, intent on continuing her violent rampage. The boy's terrified screams caught the attention of nearby neighbors. Realizing that the neighbor had seen Kason, Shanynthia immediately stopped. She returned to the house where Savi and Derral were lying. Upon entering the house, Shanynthia rushed to the bedroom where her young children were lying and rushed to kill them. Neighbors who witnessed the horrific scene quickly contacted the police for assistance, pleading for help in rescuing Kason and his siblings. The police arrived at Shanynthia's home. They found Shanynthia covered in blood, along with her 4 dead children. The scene shocked everyone. Shanynthia, still holding her cell phone in her hand, calmly called her husband Martin and confessed to killing the children. By the time the police arrived, the incident was over, and an eerie silence had fallen over the once happy home of the Shanynthia family. The house was now a scene of horror, with blood stains in every corner. A bloody knife, recovered by the police. When clergy and police arrived to assist, they were confronted with a horrifying reality. The police began gathering information and conducting an investigation. Shenythia was held without bail and her trial is scheduled for July 5. Michelle Jaiman, Shenynthia's co-worker, defended Shenythia on social media. Michelle highlighted the possibility of Shenythia suffering from postpartum depression. Cases like Shenynthia's have sparked discussions about mental illness and such tragic events. Dr. Joel Risman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that mothers killing their children is extremely rare and is usually related to underlying mental health issues. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in psychology and postpartum health, made a crucial distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. According to her, these are two distinct conditions with unique symptoms. Dr. Diane cast doubt on the idea that Shenythia Gardner was suffering from postpartum depression at the time of her actions. Craig Morton was appointed as Shenynthia's defense attorney. During the July 5, 2016 court hearing, Shenythia participated via video link, but remained completely silent, not answering any questions from Judge L. Lambert. After the trial, Shenythia was admitted to a mental health institute. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols were preparing to file a warrant for evidence gathered in the case. In January 2017, Shenythia faced formal charges on 4 counts, 2 counts of child abuse, 1 count of aggravated murder, and 1 count of child neglect. Her mother, Sonia, was shocked and confused when she learned about the horrific incident and immediately rushed to the scene to find her grandson. Initially, Sonia suspected that Shenythia and Martin were divorcing, and the prospect of raising 5 children alone may have driven Shenythia to make the desperate decision. Shenynthia's ex-husband, Kason's father, said, although he was not his son's guardian after the relationship ended, he was still able to visit Kason whenever he wanted. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shenynthia's behavior was becoming more and more extreme. Every time he tried to contact Kason, he was unsuccessful. Those close to Shenythia observed a change in her. She began to feel irritable, which gradually turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she might be suffering from postpartum depression. This change shocked those around her, as Shenythia had previously been a kind person, and the sudden change in her behavior left many wondering what had led to this tragic situation. The first signs of unusual behavior began in March 2015. Shenythia Gardner left work and picked up her 5 children. She then drove away from her Memphis home, down an unfamiliar road. Her husband, Martin Gardner, initially thought she had gone for a walk in a nearby park to clear her head. However, as hours passed and Shenythia did not return home, Martin became concerned and decided to report her missing to the police. He put out an alert for her car, which contained her and their 5 children. Unknown to Martin, Shenythia had driven more than 74 miles east to Corinth, a place where she had no relatives. She was eventually found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, although the circumstances surrounding her arrival remain unclear. Upon examination, medical staff discovered shallow cuts to Shenynthia's neck and one wrist. It appeared she had attempted to harm herself, leaving many questions unanswered for her young children, who were too young to fully understand the situation. Following her return home, Shenynthia's behavior became increasingly strange. She claimed that someone was threatening her and her family, but she provided no details about the identity of the person or their motives. Martin was shocked, as there had been no previous threats or incidents. Additionally, Shenythia began expressing dissatisfaction with her job and workload when around family and friends, stating that she felt terrible about it. She eventually started claiming that some of her co-workers were out to harm her. Despite these erratic claims, Shanynthia did not display any signs of violent or abusive behavior towards her children or others. Shanynthia Gardner's trial begins in 2021. Her defense team is focusing on her mental illness. The judge, James of the Shelby County Criminal Court, rejected the defense's argument, and in December 2021, Shanynthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. Shanynthia Gardner, then 34, was sentenced in February 2022. She received a life sentence for each murder charge and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Due to Tennessee's laws, Shanynthia Gardner will be eligible for parole after serving a total of 51 years in prison. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed his agreement with the decision, stating that it aligned with his goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanynthia would no longer be able to harm any children. A vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, law enforcement officers, and others. Sonia, the grandmother of one of the victims, was among those in attendance. The group lit red and white candles and prayed for the victims. Following the loss, Martin's colleagues set up a social media account to help him prepare for the funeral of his 4 children. During the service, Martin gave an emotional final speech, recalling his home as a place filled with happiness when his children and Shanynthia were present, and expressing his intention to keep that memory alive. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Samati Fernandez. Samati Fernandez was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Not much is known about her early family life. Samati grew up in Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. She attended a local school. Samati often used force or deception to get what she wanted. Samati's striking looks and perfect figure make her a magnet, especially to men. Samati's beauty and charm are overshadowed by her greed, vanity, and self-interest, which ultimately drives men away. Furthermore, she is extremely jealous and aggressive. Samati, due to her youthful resemblance to Barbie, spent several years working at a Universal Company bookstore, dressing up as the iconic doll. After graduating from high school, Samati started a long-term relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, a local television journalist 16 years her senior. Their relationship resulted in the birth of children, Christopher in 1996 and Christina a year later. However, constant arguments and jealousy eventually led Samati to end the relationship in 2012. Shortly after, Osvaldo, 53, died suddenly. Osvaldo did not include Samati in his will. Samati took drastic action and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent relatives and heirs from entering. Samati also took away Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was furious and took Samati to court for theft. Police intervened and forced Samati to leave the house, but no criminal charges were filed against her. Samati had other relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, the father of Samati's third daughter, Maria. Although some reports claimed the couple were officially married, the relationship ended in divorce after a few years. It was strange that some of Samati's lovers disappeared or died mysteriously under mysterious circumstances. But for a long time, for some reason, no one paid any attention to it. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samati. He was murdered during a robbery. The killers were never caught or brought to justice. As with the previous case, there was much speculation surrounding Samati's possible involvement, but there was no solid evidence linking her to the crime. Samati's most famous victim was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a native of Costa Rica, was born in December 1992 in the city of San Jose. Gerardo Cruz lived with his mother, Ana Patricia, who soon married a man named Hermes Rodriguez. who raised Gerardo Cruz as his own son. Gerardo Cruz he attended a regular school, developed a passion for motorcycles, and met his future partner, Carol, at a young age. By the time he was 23, Gerardo had settled down with Carol and their 4-year-old daughter, Genesis, in the suburban home of his aunt and uncle in San Sebastian. To support his family, Gerardo Cruz took a job at a local bakery. It was around this time, in the summer of 2015, that Gerardo Cruz met Samati, a 40-year-old woman who frequented the bakery. Despite her age, Samati was attractive. Samati began having affairs with men much younger than herself, because the attention of young lovers probably delighted Samati. Gerardo Cruz was one such affair. Despite the significant age difference, Gerardo Cruz quickly fell in love with Samati and began to meet secretly. Samati came to the bakery every day to see Gerardo Cruz, and other employees took notice of Samati's frequent visits. Samati would bring his 19-year-old daughter, Christina, with him to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo Cruz was able to balance his family life and secretly date Samad without either woman finding out. He eventually let his guard down. He began bragging about his success with women and began sharing stories with friends and colleagues about Samati, describing her as a great mistress who showered him with gifts. After just a few months together, in October 2015, Samati discovered the truth about Gerardo Cruz having a pregnant wife and a child. Samati was so angry that she started calling and texting Carol, Gerardo Cruz's wife, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo Cruz if he didn't belong to her. Gerardo Cruz tried to beg Carol's forgiveness. As for Samati, he did not take her threat seriously, believing that she would quickly calm down and find a new boyfriend. Just days after breaking up with Samati, Gerardo Cruz saw a man secretly filming a young girl's underwear with his phone. Gerardo Cruz filmed the man, stopped the girl, and advised her to report the incident to the police. He then chased the man, trying to capture his face on camera, until the man escaped in a taxi. Gerardo Cruz posted the video online and it quickly went viral. The man was identified as Luis Somano Delgado, a former member of the Ministry of Finance. The media picked up the story, and Gerardo Cruz became a national celebrity, outing Luis Somano Delgado in interviews. However, Luis Somano Delgado's lawyer accused Gerardo Cruz of wrongdoing, claiming that the video's distribution was illegal and preparing to file a lawsuit. Gerardo Cruz was surprised, wondering why he was being prosecuted instead of the man who committed the crime. Gerardo Cruz gave a radio interview confidently, without fear. The next day, he canceled his meeting with Oswald, citing an emergency after receiving a text message from Samati, supposedly to discuss another interview with a young woman in a park. Unsuspecting, Gerardo Cruz met with her, but instead of journalists, 2 men stole his bag, beat him, and stabbed him multiple times. Gerardo Cruz called Oswald when he was unconscious, and Oswald called the police and paramedics. Gerardo Cruz was taken to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. Gerardo Cruz underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in saving his life. He passed away in the intensive care unit on November 19. Gerardo Cruz's funeral was attended by a large number of people who wanted to express their condolences to his family. The community came together to express their hope that the police would quickly apprehend the perpetrators and bring them to justice. Initially, the investigation explored multiple theories. The first was that Cruz was a victim of a robbery gone wrong. This seemed plausible, given that he was attacked in a park, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife. The first theory is that Gerardo Cruz was the victim of a botched robbery, as he was attacked in a park, his bag stolen, and stabbed. However, Gerardo Cruz recently released a video exposing a nationally known former official, which has fueled another theory, that the attack was a revenge killing. The media speculated that the former official, Somano Delgado, may have hired a hitman to silence Gerardo Cruz, who had tarnished his reputation. The murder has sparked widespread debate in the press. Police later identified and tracked down the two men. The footage was made public and shown repeatedly on news programs, with viewers encouraged to watch the footage closely. Soon after, the identity of one suspect was confirmed when he voluntarily surrendered to the police, cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. The investigation quickly identified several accomplices and organizers of the crime, Samati and her daughter Christina, thanks to information provided. Those involved, including taxi driver Ronald Archie, worker Cesar Chavez, a young miner, and Omar Costa, were arrested. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all those involved in the crime through phone calls and text messages. Samati was identified as the mastermind, who had carefully planned the murder for his daughter Christina. They enlisted the help of friends Ronald Archie and Cesar Chavez to find two assassins to kill Gerardo Cruz and stage a robbery in the park at night. Omar Costa later joined the plot, tasked with ensuring Gerardo Cruz was present at the park. Samati chose October 7th as the date of the massacre. Samati kept in constant contact with all the suspects, assigning roles and ensuring everyone followed the plan. Furthermore, Samati asked the participants to take an item from Gerardo Cruz as proof that the crime had been completed. The evidence against Samati was a series of text messages outlining the murder plan and the roles of each participant in detail. The motive behind the crime was a case of jealousy. She had carefully planned the crime and even involved her own daughter, who assisted her in every step of the process. Both Samati and her daughter were taken into custody immediately, and the possibility of releasing them on bail was ruled out due to concerns that they would attempt to flee the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar Costa, who was responsible for surveillance and was the youngest participant in the crime. As a minor, Omar Costa was handed over to authorities that specialize in handling juvenile offenders. The investigation took about a year and a half to complete, and the trial did not begin until December 2017. It was discovered that Samati had a history of criminal activity. The verdict was not announced until January 23, 2018. According to the court decision, Samati was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Her daughter, as well as Ronald Archie and Cesar Chavez, received 25 years in prison each. Omar Costa, on the other hand, who had been following the victim, was acquitted. Gerardo Cruz's family has received $140,000 in moral damages. After the verdict was announced, relatives expressed gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo Cruz's killers a fair punishment. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sherry Miller. Sherry Miller was born on October 13, 1971, in Flint, Michigan, a once prosperous Midwestern auto industry city that had fallen on hard times. Her childhood was marked by hardship, growing up without a father figure in her life. Her mother led a loose lifestyle, often drinking heavily and changing partners frequently. Sherry's childhood was spent in a trailer next to her mother's men, who regularly abused her. According to Sherry, she was abused from the age of 3 or 4. By the age of 16, she had left to fend for herself. At 17, she married, became pregnant, and had a child. However, her marriage eventually ended. Sherry remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, had a history of violence and was convicted of second-degree child abuse for assaulting his own child, resulting in multiple skull fractures. Although Tribby was tried for abusing her 6-year-old daughter, he was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. By the age of 26, Sherry was a single mother of 3 children, each from a different father. To support her family, she worked multiple jobs. Although she may not be a model, Sherry possessed a charm that drew people to her. In 1997, Sherry's life changed when she started working as an accountant at B&O Auto Salvage, a company owned by 47-year-old Bruce Miller. It was there that she saw a man who could provide for her and her children. Bruce Miller was born on July 26, 1951. He spent many years working at General Motors. After leaving General Motors, Bruce Miller moved into the auto scrap business, where he would collect old cars and resell their parts. Bruce Miller was married 3 times and had a passion for racing and socializing. He was known for his generosity and openness to others. When Sherry joined his company as an employee, Bruce Miller initially wasn't interested in her romantically. However, Sherry eventually caught his attention, and they began an office romance despite their 20-year age difference. Their relationship progressed quickly. Bruce Miller was delighted with the attention Sherry was getting, and the couple quickly moved from dating to living together. Just 4 months later, on April 23, 1999, Bruce Miller and Sherry were married in Las Vegas. Sherry and her children moved in with Bruce Miller, finding the stability she craved. Bruce Miller's brother, Chuck Miller, said she thought Bruce Miller was the best thing that ever happened to her, finally having a normal life. However, Chuck Miller's wife was concerned about Sherry's overspending, maxing out credit cards and running out of available cash. Bruce Miller seemed unconcerned and largely ignored the issue. Sherry also worked, selling Mary Kay cosmetics to customers at home. Bruce Miller bought Sherry a computer to help monitor the account. In 1999, while using her home computer to research vacation destinations, Sherry stumbled upon adult chat rooms on the internet. Before social media and text messaging became popular, people often used online chat rooms to connect with others. Some of these chat rooms had adult content and allowed users to anonymously flirt and engage in virtual relationships. Bruce Miller knew that Sherry had been flirting with other people in these online chat rooms. However, he considered this behavior harmless and chose to trust her, not wanting to create tension in their marriage. Sherry quickly became comfortable in the virtual world, regularly logging into chat rooms and sharing her deepest desires with strangers under various pseudonyms. One of the men Sherry met online was Jerry Cassidy, who used the pseudonym Rena Dudes. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri, having been married, raised a son, and enjoyed deer hunting with his brothers. Jerry also had aspirations of becoming an FBI agent. Later, after becoming a police officer, Jerry exposed corruption in the police department by reporting falsified records to a colleague. However, this decision resulted in him being demoted and eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Despite doing the right thing, after losing his career, Jerry suffered from depression and began to abuse alcohol and drugs. During this period, his marriage fell apart. However, he managed to pick himself up and moved to Reno, Nevada, where he took a job as a security guard at Harrah's Casino. In his spare time, he frequented online chat rooms, where he eventually met Sherry. Jerry and Sherry began exchanging messages, which led to a face-to-face meeting in Reno in July 1999. Sherry attended a Mary Kay convention with a friend, using it as an opportunity to meet Jerry in person. Their online romance quickly turned into a physical relationship, giving Jerry hope that his life was about to improve. Sherry presented herself as a wealthy businesswoman who was married to a disabled man and was seeking a discreet sexual encounter. Jerry believed her story. Jerry was deeply infatuated with Sherry, telling his friend Carol Slaughter that she was extremely active in the bedroom. During the summer and fall, Sherry used her cosmetics business as a cover for secret trips to Reno, where she would meet Jerry. When they were apart, they exchanged sexually explicit messages and videos over the internet. They even went so far as to rename their online accounts, with Sherry calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Sherry's Fool. Despite being an ex-cop, Jerry failed to see the warning signs, blinded by the affectionate emails. It seemed like Jerry was an easy target for Sherry. She quickly convinced Jerry that he needed to kill her husband. Those who knew Jerry noticed a significant change in him under her influence. In September, Sherry announced to Jerry that she was pregnant with his child. What Jerry did not know, however, was that Sherry had had a tubal ligation in 1995 and was unable to have children. Despite this, Sherry told Jerry that her husband, Bruce Miller, had discovered the pregnancy and beaten her, causing her to miscarry. Sherry then announced that she was pregnant again, this time with twins. Believing her lies, Jerry begged Sherry to leave her husband, take their supposed future children, and live with him. Sherry revealed that she could not leave her husband Bruce Miller because of his mafia ties, and she feared for her and Jerry's lives. During this time, Jerry got into trouble and was arrested at a casino for being drunk and disorderly. Their online communication stopped while Jerry was in custody. After his release, Jerry decided to protect Sherry from her husband by creating distance. Jerry returned to his family in Missouri, and the couple maintained their relationship through online chat rooms. Sherry continued to update Jerry, sharing photos of her pregnancy. Jerry was eager to believe it. However, on November 5, 1999, Jerry received an email purportedly from Bruce Miller stating that he knew about the pregnancy and vowed to prevent the child from being born. Concerned, Jerry tried to contact Sherry, who eventually sent him a text saying she needed to leave for a few days and would contact him later. The next day, Jerry received another text from Bruce Miller claiming that he had pressured Sherry into having an abortion. The text included pictures of Sherry, beaten and bruised. Jerry believes that Bruce Miller killed his unborn twins. Angry and grief-stricken, Jerry blames Bruce Miller for the deaths of his 3 children, including the twins, and the abuse of Sherry. On November 8, Jerry confided in Sherry that he could no longer continue the situation. Jerry was going to kill her husband, Bruce Miller. The couple then devised a plan to kill Bruce Miller, mapping out the route, parking, location, and best time to dispose of the body. Jerry drove from his home to Michigan to carry out the plan. That evening, as Bruce Miller was getting ready to leave work, Sherry called him and told him to pick up pizza on the way home, as planned. Jerry was waiting, and when Bruce Miller showed up, Jerry shot Bruce Miller with a 20-gauge shotgun. After the murder, Jerry returned home, and Sherry began the next part of her plan. She called Bruce Miller's brother, Chuck Miller, expressing concern about her husband being gone for so long and asked him to check on Bruce Miller at the junkyard. When Chuck Miller arrived, he found Bruce Miller lying dead in a pool of blood. Witnesses reported that Bruce Miller had been shot in the chest at close range with a shotgun. When his wife Sherry heard the news, she began screaming and crying. Police found no evidence of a suspect. They discovered that Bruce Miller often carried large amounts of cash and initially suspected his death was the result of a robbery because his wallet was missing. None of the leads came up and the case was soon closed. Meanwhile, according to Bruce Miller's sister, Judy Miller, Sherry's behavior was not that of a grieving wife. 2 days after Bruce Miller's death, Sherry was spotted dancing at a bar in Otisville, Michigan. Within 2 weeks, she had found a new partner, Jeff Foster, a local delivery boy, and her relationship with Jerry was over. However, Jerry had hope. After killing Bruce Miller, he and Sherry would be together. But Sherry began to distance herself from Jerry. A month after the murder, she brought her new boyfriend, Jeff Foster, into her home and broke things off with Jerry, leaving him heartbroken. At this point, Jerry probably realized he had unjustly taken a life and was haunted by guilt. Jerry began to investigate, and he discovered that Sherry had lied and fabricated the whole thing. 3 months later, on February 11, 2000, Jerry committed suicide in his apartment in Odessa, Missouri, with a .22 caliber rifle. His body was found sitting with an open Bible on his lap. Jerry had condemned himself, accepted his guilt, and executed himself. Jerry's mother revealed in an interview that while cleaning the apartment, she accidentally found a briefcase hidden under the bed. Outside the briefcase was an envelope, and inside, they found 3 suicide notes. The contents of the letters indicate that Jerry confessed to killing Bruce Miller because he believed that Bruce Miller had abused Sherry and killed Jerry's 3 unborn children. However, the letters also made it clear that Sherry had lied to Jerry about the acts that Sherry had accused Bruce Miller of. In the letter, Jerry said that he went there and killed Bruce Miller. At the time, he was stupid and didn't realize the consequences of his actions. Now the truth about his depression is finally coming to light. He couldn't share his secret with anyone, and it consumed him. The truth is that Sherry wanted her husband dead so she could get the money. She got what she wanted, but she will soon learn that her actions will have consequences. He now understood that Sherry's actions were all a ruse. She had no qualms about hurting people. To back up his claim, Jerry provided transcripts of their text conversations. In between their intimate exchanges, Sherry had coached Jerry on how to locate dumpsters, where to park without being detected, and other important details. On February 22, 2000, the Jerry family's attorneys contacted the Jesse County Sheriff's Department with this new information. The police waited for Sherry Miller at the airport as she returned from a trip to Reno with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster. Sherry was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Police described Sherry as a skilled manipulator who tricked her lover into killing her husband under false pretenses. Despite overwhelming evidence against her, Sherry maintained her innocence to her husband Bruce Miller's family. Her trial began on December 12, 2000, in Michigan, attracting national attention due to the internet-related crime. The prosecution presented thousands of text messages between Sherry and Jerry, exposing her deception. According to the prosecution, Sherry's motive for wanting her husband Bruce Miller dead was financial gain. However, the defense argued that Sherry only received a minimal amount of money after Bruce Miller died. The defense argued that Jerry, acting as a jilted lover, fabricated evidence against Sherry. Sherry maintained that the nature of their online communications was purely imaginative and not based on fact. Furthermore, she admitted to lying about her pregnancy, saying her intention was to help relieve Jerry's depression. She also admitted to falsely claiming abuse in order to convince Jerry to stop contacting her. Sherry adamantly denied writing the messages describing the crimes, instead claiming that Jerry, a former homicide detective, created them using his expertise. However, evidence of these messages was discovered on Sherry's computer. Sherry Miller was found guilty on December 22 and received a life sentence for the murder charge, as well as a 54 to 81-year sentence for conspiracy. In 2007, while incarcerated, Sherry was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health conditions. She began treatment, filed an appeal, and even got married for the 4th time. Michael DeNoia was drawn to Sherry's story after seeing it on the news. Michael contacted her and they began corresponding. In 2008, Michael visited Sherry in prison and proposed to her. Although reports claim they were married in April 2008, there is no concrete evidence to support this. Sherry's fortunes changed when she won an appeal in 2008, resulting in her release from prison in 2009. A federal judge overturned her conviction, ruling that Jerry's suicide letter was inadmissible as evidence because it couldn't be scrutinized through cross-examination. The judge ordered a new trial and set bail, allowing Sherry to be released. In 2012, Sherry was sent back to prison to resume serving her original sentence after the court re-evaluated the admissibility of Jerry's suicide letter. Having spent 3 years outside, Sherry continued to maintain her innocence. In 2016, Sherry sent a 4-page typewritten letter to a district judge, abruptly confessing to her role in Bruce Miller's death. The sudden admission stunned everyone, as it was thought that Sherry would never voluntarily take responsibility. In the letter, Sherry wrote, "A pivotal moment came when she was forced to return to prison after 3 years of freedom. She had been living with her daughter and granddaughter, and she begged her daughter not to come with her when she was sent back to prison. However, her daughter refused to listen. As she walked through the prison doors, she turned around and saw her daughter crying, screaming, 'No, Mom, no, don't go.' It was then that she realized the devastation her crime had caused Bruce Miller and Bruce Miller's loved ones, including Jerry and his family." In a public interview in 2022 on a popular television channel, Sherry made some shocking confessions. She said that Bruce Miller had no connections to the mafia and had never abused her. Instead, she admitted that she used makeup to fake bruises and created fake ultrasound scans to trick Jerry. According to her, her motive was not financial gain. She claimed that she was afraid that Bruce Miller would discover her true nature. Sherry stated that sharing her story publicly helped her find some inner peace. However, she still struggles with guilt and shame, admitting it's difficult to look at herself in the mirror knowing what she did. After waiting for an opportunity to reveal the truth and find some sense of peace, Sherry remains imprisoned at the Huron Valley Women's Complex in Michigan. Sherry Miller has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Padgett. Jessica Padgett was born on December 15, 1980, and spent her entire life in Pennsylvania. As a child, she was energetic and cheerful. Her parents, Thomas and Derral, got divorced when she was still young. Her mother remarried soon after, and Jessica came to regard her stepfather as a second parent. After graduating high school in 1998, Jessica pursued higher education in preschool education. It was during this time that she met Michael Padgett, and the two started dating and eventually living together. Over the course of their 8-year relationship, they had 2 children together. The couple finally tied the knot in August 2014, and some sources suggest that Michael also had a child from a previous relationship. Michael proved to be a loving father and husband, but like any family, they faced their share of challenges. Jessica was generally happy in her marriage to Michael, but tragedy struck just 4 months after their wedding, when she mysteriously disappeared. During a 2-year period, Jessica worked at a kindergarten in Northampton, a job she loved because she was great with children and could easily connect with them. The feeling was mutual, as the kids adored Jessica and looked forward to spending time with her. On November 21, 2014, Jessica took her older kids to school and then headed to work with her younger son, who attended the same kindergarten where she was employed. It seemed like a typical day, with no indication of any problems. At lunchtime, Jessica asked the administrator if she could take a short break to send a fax from her mother and stepfather's house, which was located in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator granted her request. Jessica drove to her mother's house, leaving her son at the kindergarten. She promised to return within 30 minutes. However, an hour passed, and Jessica failed to return. Her colleagues grew concerned and started calling her, but she didn't answer. An hour later, the kindergarten administrator contacted Jessica's husband, Michael, to ask if he knew where she might be, as she had left work but never returned. Michael said he was at work and had no idea where his wife was. He promised to try to contact her himself. Michael immediately started calling Jessica, but all his calls went straight to voicemail. This was unusual, as Jessica always answered calls from her family. Michael decided to contact his mother-in-law, Derral Clayton, who was in Florida, to ask if Jessica had reached out to her. Derral had not heard from Jessica that day and was worried, knowing it was out of character for her daughter to ignore calls. Derral advised Michael to call her husband, Greg, Jessica's stepfather to ask if he had any information. However, as it turned out, Greg had not seen or spoken to Jessica that day. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife Jessica missing, police tracked her phone signal, which indicated it was approximately 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. Although the data wasn't entirely accurate due to inherent location errors, it gave police a general area to search. By the time they started their search, it was already dark outside. They soon found a white Subaru Outback in one of the parking lots, Jessica's car. The car was unlocked and empty, with Jessica's purse containing documents and bank cards on the seats. The keys were still in the ignition, and her phone lay nearby on the passenger seat. Initially, there were no signs of a crime or struggle in the car. However, the police were left with some pressing questions. Where was Jessica, and what had caused her to abandon her car and valuables so close to her workplace? The police required CCTV footage to clarify the events surrounding Jessica's disappearance. A camera on the back wall of a store across the street from where Jessica's car was found captured the scene. The police requested the store manager to provide them with the recordings. Upon reviewing the footage, they saw Jessica driving into the parking lot at around 1 p.m., exiting her car and standing by the driver's door for a period. Subsequently, she walked away and did not return. The investigators were perplexed by Jessica's decision to leave behind her documents, phone, and keys. Did she voluntarily go into hiding? The footage showed Jessica walking between 2 buildings towards another parking lot, but her disappearance remained unexplained due to the lack of cameras in that area. In the store, investigators reviewed the recording on a small, outdated monitor, so they decided to make a copy of the video to analyze it further on a larger, modern screen at the station. The Northampton Police Department, being a small force, reached out to the Pennsylvania State Police for assistance in organizing a search. Flyers featuring Jessica's image were distributed throughout Northampton and neighboring cities, as well as through the media and social networks. State police detectives worked to reconstruct the timeline of events leading up to Jessica's disappearance. They began by re-interviewing the kindergarten staff. After learning that Jessica had left work to send a fax from her mother's house, the detectives visited the house, hoping to find answers. The house, located about 4 miles from the kindergarten, was a 10-minute drive away. When they arrived, the detectives spoke with Derral and her husband Greg, from whom they learned that Jessica had keys to the house and could come and go as she pleased. On the day of her disappearance, Derral was in Florida, and Greg was not at home either. Although every sent fax is recorded in the device's usage history, it turned out that Greg's fax machine was faulty. Therefore, it was unclear whether Jessica had been at her mother's house that day. Perhaps she had chosen to use a different fax machine. However, this did not explain why she had left her belongings in her car. Next, the detectives decided to interview Jessica's husband, Michael, to get his alibi for the day of her disappearance. He claimed that he left the house first, with a friend driving him to work. The detectives verified his statement, aware that in many cases, husbands are involved in their wives' disappearances or deaths. Meanwhile, a search party was organized, and the media appealed to the public for any information, asking witnesses to contact the police. 2 days after Jessica's disappearance, the investigation had stalled, with no new leads. To verify her intended destination, the detectives searched for surveillance cameras along her supposed route to her mother's house. There was only one road leading to her mother's house, and nearby was an Exxon gas station, equipped with surveillance cameras. If Jessica had indeed been heading to her mother's house, she should have appeared on the gas station's surveillance footage. While reviewing the video footage, the detective spotted Jessica's car driving into view around 12:56 p.m. Given the short distance between the gas station and her mother's house, it was likely she'd need to drive back soon, since the fax machine at her mother's house was out of order. The detective then scanned the recording to see if the car had turned around and headed in the opposite direction. What caught their attention was that the car reappeared in the footage just 14 minutes later. This time, the white car sped through the gas station and headed in the direction where the police would later find it. Jessica's driving seemed peculiar. Instead of driving straight, she turned into the gas station and then onto the road on the other side without stopping. Afterwards, she drove to the city center and left her car in a parking lot. The only logical explanation for this unusual driving route was that Jessica was in a hurry and encountered a red traffic light at the intersection. By driving through the gas station, she managed to avoid the red light and continue driving on a road with a green light. Eventually, she left the car in the parking lot, where it was later found by the police. Upon reviewing the footage of Jessica exiting the car, the investigators noticed something they'd previously overlooked. Although Jessica was 5'4" tall and weighed 130 pounds, the person getting out of the car was significantly taller and heavier. Based on the height of Jessica's car, experts estimated the person's height to be between 5'11" and 6'3". While inspecting the abandoned car, police found the driver's seat was pushed all the way forward, making it uncomfortable for anyone over 5'11" tall to sit behind the wheel. This suggested the driver was trying to mislead police into thinking it was Jessica behind the wheel. But who was this tall person trying to frame her? The prime suspect was Michael, who stood around 6 feet tall. Police brought him in for questioning, and he maintained he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance, claiming he was at work when the kindergarten called him. Detectives investigated Michael's alibi by interviewing his colleagues and tracking his phone's geolocation on the day of Jessica's disappearance. Their findings confirmed Michael was at work, ruling him out as the driver in the recording. This was the 4th day since Jessica vanished, leaving her children in a state of distress and uncertainty. The search continued, but unfortunately yielded no results. Upon re-examining the recording of someone exiting Jessica's car, investigators sought to identify the individual. For the second time, officers spotted something they had previously overlooked. 1 minute after the unknown person vanished behind the building, a white SUV, believed to be a Ford, departed from the location. Notably, Jessica's stepfather, Greg, matched the height description and owned a similar vehicle. The police invited Greg to the station for questioning. Greg was shocked to learn he was a suspect in his stepdaughter's disappearance. He claimed to have left his car at a repair service center, and on the day in question, a neighbor drove him there to collect his Ford. Afterwards, he visited the Exxon gas station to grab a bite to eat, coincidentally the same station that provided the CCTV footage to the police. However, Greg was unaware of this. After re-examining the recording, investigators observed him driving past the Exxon gas station 2 minutes after leaving the parking lot, indicating he didn't stop there for lunch as claimed. In fact, the evidence revealed that Greg had lied. But could the man Jessica referred to as her father have played a role in her disappearance? Following an interview with the man's neighbor, detectives discovered that Jessica did not drive him to the car service, as alleged. This meant that Greg's entire story was fabricated. By assembling all the facts, investigators deduced that Greg was at home when Jessica arrived to send the fax. It's possible that something occurred, prompting Greg to drive Jessica's car to the parking lot in the city center. A group of police officers visited the man's house, where Jessica's mother, Derral, gave them permission to search the premises. During the search, one of the officers noticed the fax machine and discovered that Greg had lied about it being out of order. The device's usage history revealed that Jessica had indeed sent a fax from the house on the day she disappeared, confirming she was at her parents' residence at the time. In the basement, the officers found a trash can containing napkins with bloodstains. Furthermore, Greg's slippers, discovered in a dumpster on the street, had dried blood on them as well. Derral mentioned that Greg had called the garbage company the previous day to request an early trash pickup, which seemed unusual since the trash can was not full. It appeared that Greg had likely disposed of evidence, including cleaning products and rags, in this manner. The police confronted Greg once again, informing him that they knew his previous statements were false and that they had found incriminating evidence in his house. They also revealed that they knew Jessica was in his house on the day she vanished. Faced with this new information, Greg began to talk. Gregory Graff, alias Greg, claimed that he returned home on the afternoon of November 21st to find Jessica's car in the driveway and bloodstains on the carpet. According to him, she was already deceased when he arrived. He stated that he panicked and was afraid to contact the police because he believed no one would believe him. Graff claimed to have driven Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center and then returned home. He alleged that Jessica owed someone money, which led to her death. However, this story was just another fabrication by Gregory Graff. Detectives learned that the day before Jessica vanished, Graff purchased adult toys. Frustrated with Graff's evasives, they directly asked him where he had hidden his stepdaughter's body, pointing out that an autopsy would provide many answers. Graff realized he was caught and altered his story again. He claimed that on the day in question, he was at home watching adult videos when Jessica arrived to send a fax. He stated that she was using the computer while he stood behind her. Graff alleged that he became sexually aroused and desired his stepdaughter. Without speaking a word, he claimed he pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then, he allegedly moved her body to the bedroom and drove her car to a parking lot in the city center. He mentioned that his Ford was parked near the car service where he had left it for repairs earlier. Therefore, he went there after getting out of Jessica's car, adjusting the seat to make it appear as though she was behind the wheel. Greg's next words stunned the investigators. He revealed that after returning home, he had set up a video camera near the bed and recorded himself with his stepdaughter. This statement was unsettling, especially since everyone knew Jessica was already deceased. The police later discovered this disturbing video on Greg's computer. According to Greg, he then wrapped Jessica's body in a blanket and concealed it in a nearby ravine, after which he returned home and began cleaning up. He also mentioned his family and parents, but never expressed remorse for Jessica's death. Derral was forced to confront the devastating reality that her daughter was dead and that her husband was responsible for the tragedy. What Greg had done to Jessica's body was beyond Derral's comprehension. Authorities charged 53-year-old Gregory Graff with the murder of Jessica Padgett. During the investigation, some theories emerged, suggesting that when Jessica arrived, Greg attempted to persuade her into a romantic encounter, but when she rejected him, he killed her out of fear of being exposed. However, this theory was difficult to prove, as Jessica's body showed no signs of defensive wounds. She died from a single wound to the back of the head, which was consistent with Greg's account. In the state of Pennsylvania, Greg could have faced the death penalty. However, since Jessica was already deceased when he committed the second part of his crime, the prosecutor's office could not pursue the death penalty. After examining Greg and Jessica's computers and phones, the police found no evidence of a connection between them beyond their stepfather-stepdaughter relationship. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli stated that Philadelphia lawyer John McMahon Jr. failed to submit the results of any mental health evaluation for Gregory Graff. McMahon claimed he had Graff evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but the evaluation showed no signs of diminished mental capacity, so he did not use it in the trial. At one of the court sessions, the jury had to watch a 6-minute video of Greg's heinous crimes. He used adult toys that he had bought the day before. The jury didn't want to watch the video, but the judge said they were obligated to do so before reaching a decision. Graff's lawyer tried to prove it wasn't a planned crime and that his client committed a crime of the third degree, not the first. Therefore, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli made the difficult decision to show the jury a 6-minute video recording filmed by Graf. After sentencing, the judge suggested that the jury consider seeking counseling from a psychologist to help them cope with the trial's emotional impact. Following the verdict, Jessica Padgett's husband, Michael, spoke about the struggle of moving forward without his wife, the only woman he ever loved, and the challenges of raising their 3 children without her. "She was the kindest person you'd ever meet," he told reporters, still grieving her loss. Derral Clayton filed for divorce from Gregory Graf, but the process was complicated and required a court hearing. During the proceeding, 55-year-old Gregory Graf, who appeared via video feed from his Pennsylvania prison cell, refused to sign documents that would grant him 25% of the shared assets with Derral Clayton. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luke Jobson. Born and raised in Thornaby, Luke Jobson attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Harewood Primary Schools. With a promising career ahead, he was mere months away from qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of studying and an apprenticeship. A talented sportsman, Luke's impressive football skills earned him acclaim as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his younger years. One coach fondly remembered him as the fastest runner on 2 legs. His father, Stuart, cherished memories of Luke's passion for fashion and his meticulous attention to detail, often playfully pointing out any creases in his son's shirts. Luke took immense pride in his appearance, always striving to look immaculate. On Saturday, January 26, 2019, Luke and his friends visited a popular nightclub called The Keys in a small town named Yarm, where all the nightlife is concentrated on the High Street, which is where The Keys is still located today. Luke went to The Keys on Saturday night, but failed to return home. When his parents tried calling him the next morning, Sunday, he didn't answer. Additionally, his friends were unable to provide any information about his whereabouts. As a result, his family issued an urgent appeal on Facebook, which prompted dozens of people to join the search for him. On Sunday, the police released their first official statement saying they were searching for Luke. A Cleveland police spokeswoman expressed extreme concern, stating that Luke's disappearance was out of character because he had not returned home or contacted family or friends. The police appealed to the public for any private CCTV or dash cam footage in the area that might aid their investigation. It was established that Luke Jobson was involved in a possible altercation shortly before he vanished. According to social media reports, he got into a fight with several individuals outside a nightclub around 2 a.m. The last sighting of Luke was near Yarm's school at approximately 2:15 a.m. While the police investigated this information, their primary focus at the time was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, took to social media to make a heartfelt plea for help, describing her ordeal as an absolute nightmare and begging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also made an emotional appeal on Facebook, asking the public to help locate him. On Sunday, friends and family launched a search for Luke near the river in Yarm, which soon escalated into a large-scale operation. The following morning, hundreds of people gathered in the Yarm school car park, braving the bitter cold to join the search effort. The turnout was a testament to the community spirit, with many strangers among the crowd. Cars arrived filled with volunteers, while others walked to the scene bundled up in winter gear, ready to lend a hand. In total, more than 300 people participated in the search. 18 large groups combed areas as far afield as Preston Park, Stokesley, Cowboy Wood, and Roseberry Topping. Meanwhile, specialist police search teams scoured the riverbanks near Yarm School. However, at 1 p.m., the search teams received devastating news they had all feared. Despite the tireless efforts of the emergency services, Luke's family and friends, the operation ended in tragedy. The search was called off after police discovered a body in the river. Cleveland police have confirmed that a body found in the river at Yarm is that of 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. The officers who were searching for him had recovered the body. Our thoughts are with Luke's family and friends during this difficult time, and specially trained officers will continue to provide them with support following his death. Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, have paid a heartfelt tribute to their son. They described him as a popular, ambitious, and young man who was passionate about the gym. His mother, Lisa, said she and Luke's father are extremely proud of the person they raised. Luke's death sparked an overwhelming outpouring of emotion in Teesside. On social media, an enormous number of tributes poured in from friends and loved ones, all of whom were deeply saddened by his sudden passing. In Yarm, a massive crowd gathered on Tuesday evening to hold a vigil in his honor. As a mark of respect, everyone lit candles and added ribbons to their social media profiles. Close to 1,000 people attended the vigil, and Luke's family expressed their gratitude for the public support during the difficult days that followed his disappearance. The police launched an investigation into Luke's death and interviewed numerous individuals, including those who were at a nightclub on the night of the incident. They soon obtained CCTV footage that corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and others. News of the altercation as the likely cause of his death spread rapidly after his disappearance, with speculation about the circumstances continuing to circulate on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of a fight before Luke vanished, and they arrested 6 teenagers, 3 16-year-olds and 3 18-year-olds, on suspicion of his murder. However, they released all of them shortly after, and the detectives pressed on with their investigation. The case saw a new development only in the following January. Cleveland police charged 5 individuals aged between 17 and 20, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, not with Luke's murder. They will soon appear in court. One of the teenagers, who was 17 at the time and has since turned 18, cannot be named due to legal age restrictions. The others are Edwin Taha, 20, who denies starting the fight, Ryan Alpe, 19, who claims there was no fight, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, who denies guilt, and Hamad Asif, 18, who also denies a fight took place. Reports suggest Edwin Taha led the gang. Under English and Welsh law, a person is guilty of affray if they use or threaten unlawful violence, causing a reasonably firm person at the scene to fear for their safety. When multiple individuals are involved, their collective conduct is considered. The CCTV footage reveals Luke fleeing the scene, suggesting he was fearful for his safety. Not only were there verbal threats against him, but physical ones as well, which will be explored later. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we must first identify the spark that ignited the conflict that night. Unfortunately, none of the suspects have provided a clear answer to this question. Additionally, it remains unclear where Luke's friends, with whom he was at the nightclub, were during the altercation. The police-released recording fails to clarify this. Judging from the footage, it appears Luke had no intention of leaving the club, as he was wearing only a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside the establishment. The footage reveals Luke standing up to the gang, which prompted them to chase him, forcing him to flee for his life. Fortunately, Luke's athletic abilities enabled him to outrun his pursuers, but Taha and the others soon returned to the nightclub, got into Abdul Majid's Volkswagen Golf, and eventually caught up with Luke near the school. After exiting the car, Taha sprayed an unknown substance, likely pepper spray, into Luke's face, causing him to lose his vision. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over the wall and entered the Yarm school grounds, where he was last seen on CCTV cameras, entering the boathouse. Sadly, Luke was never seen again after that. Luke Jobson, who had a passion for life and strived to be the best version of himself, tragically lost his life and was found dead in the water near his school 2 days after he failed to emerge from the boathouse. The cause of his death was determined to be drowning. During the investigation, All suspects initially denied any involvement, and none were taken into custody before the trial. Edwin Taha was released on bail, but later, along with Ali Abdul Maid, they both changed their pleas to guilty for their roles in the fight during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020. The autopsy was performed by pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton, and the results were presented in court. The toxicology report revealed that Luke had consumed a significant amount of alcohol before his death, which would have likely caused clear signs of intoxication in an average person. Additionally, traces of a banned substance were found in his system, which he had taken some time before his death. The court was told that the combination of alcohol and the banned substance would have made Luke more susceptible to the effects of hypothermia. Luke's death was not caused by any injuries or underlying natural diseases. There was no sign of assault or inflammation in his eyes. The autopsy found no evidence that he had been sprayed with a substance before he died. However, witnesses told the inquest that Luke was pepper sprayed, struggled to walk, and was unable to see. After the incident, Taha returned to the high street and bragged to bystanders about pepper spraying Luke. The senior coroner, Claire Bailey, concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. Lisa Jobson fought back tears as she read a statement outside Crown Court, where two young criminals were facing justice for their role in the death of her 22-year-old son, Luke. She described the gang that surrounded and chased him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. His family loved and protected him from the day he was born. He was their world, their only boy, and they couldn't have wished for a better son. Now, his family misses him every minute of every day, and their pain will never go away. Their lives have been destroyed, and they will never be the same people again. They know exactly what they did, including Edwin Taha, who sprayed Luke's eyes and face, causing him hurt and pain. His family can't get out of their heads every minute of that night, and the faces of his killers are the last ones their boy had to see on this earth, a living hell. They want someone to take away their pain and bring Luke back, but no one can. At the trial, Abdul Majid's lawyer argued that his client was not aware that Taha was carrying pepper spray. According to the lawyer, Majid did not know that one of his co-accused had a weapon, and he did not expect the victim to be assaulted with it. During the hearing, Taha's lawyer mentioned that his client had a difficult upbringing, but acknowledged that this was no excuse for his actions. The lawyer explained that something was said on the night of the incident that triggered the events. And although Taha made poor decisions, he accepts that what happened was wrong. Taha's lawyer, John Nixon, also revealed that Taha had a challenging childhood, having moved to the UK from France at the age of 4 without speaking English. After his mother left him and his brother with a foster family in Stockton when he was 10, Taha struggled to cope. Judge Howard Crone informed the two defendants that, although they were not legally responsible for Luke's death, the events that unfolded would not have occurred if Luke had not been chased along Yarm High Street. Consequently, Luke would not have entered the school and boathouse, and ultimately, he would not have drowned in the River Tees on October 30th, 2020. Edwin Taha, 20, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 21 months in prison. Additionally, he received a further 4 years and 4 months of imprisonment for charges related to prohibited substances. Ali Abdul Majid, 19, of Corvus Drive, Stockton, also admitted. He was sentenced to 15 months, suspended for 18 months, and ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. After the hearing at Teesside Crown Court, Temporary Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson, the senior investigating officer, explained that police inquiries revealed an altercation on Yarm High Street preceding Luke's pursuit by multiple males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, Luke was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which severely affected him. Regardless of the intentions behind the male's actions that evening, Luke's family are left grieving the loss of their beloved son and brother. The impact on his entire family has been immense and cannot be measured. While nothing can bring Luke back, now that the criminal case has concluded, we hope it brings some sense of closure to his family, allowing them to move forward with their lives. The prosecution has dropped charges against two individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alpi and 18-year-old Hamad Asif. In October 2020, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing of Taha and Abdul Majid. He expressed sympathy for the family of Luke Jobson, acknowledging that this would be a difficult time for them. Atkinson emphasized that while Taha and Majid were found guilty of being involved in an affray with Luke before his death, there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly led to the tragic events that occurred after the attack. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio Gose met at a university party while studying at the University of Northern Colorado. It was instant attraction, with Ignacio's friendly nature and great personality drawing Heather in right away. They both felt an undeniable spark of love at first sight. Heather had a lively and fun personality combined with a touch of innocence. Her stunning physical appearance didn't go unnoticed, with her pale skin, red lips, and dark hair captivating Ignacio. He affectionately nicknamed her his Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their first date, she was thrilled and eagerly shared the news with her roommates, who were over the moon for her. Heather's friends were delighted for her, as she hadn't had much experience with dating, and they believed this date could be the start of something truly special. As Heather and Ignacio's relationship blossomed, it quickly evolved into a more serious commitment. Ignacio was devoted, constantly surprising Heather with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved, appreciated, and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio took their relationship to the next level by proposing to Heather, and she happily accepted his proposal. Heather and Ignacio got engaged, but Heather made it clear that if Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end the marriage immediately, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. This was non-negotiable for her, and she would not tolerate infidelity in their relationship. A year after getting engaged, they got married in a beautiful ceremony. Ignacio became a police officer at the Gray, Colorado Police Department, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her co-workers and customers loved her because she was so good at comforting people during tough times. One of her colleagues even said she was wonderful in every way. 5 years after getting married, Heather and Ignacio decided to start a family. Soon, Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. Being a mom filled Heather with joy, and her whole world revolved around her new daughter. Ignacio was a great dad too. From the outside, it seemed like they had the perfect life. Heather's father died of a heart attack in 1997, and soon after, her mother was diagnosed with cancer, which was even more devastating. To care for her mother, Heather dedicated herself to providing support and care for several years until her mother's passing in 2003. During this time, Ignacio was a loving and supportive husband and father, taking on more responsibilities to care for their daughter Victoria and help with household chores. However, after months of supporting Heather through her grief, Ignacio began to develop feelings for his coworker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department, who was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office. Shauna's marriage was struggling, and she and Ignacio started as friends, but eventually developed a romantic relationship. They began flirting and teasing each other, and Shauna's compliments caught Ignacio's attention, captivating him. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened, and their feelings shifted from playful flirtation to intense passion and intimacy. Shauna and Ignacio's romantic relationship grew stronger, fueling local gossip, but Ignacio's wife Heather remained clueless about his infidelity. Despite everyone in their social circle being aware of the situation, no one dared to inform Heather. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's affair continued to thrive, with Heather still unaware of her husband's deception. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she eagerly shared the news with Ignacio. However, he didn't take the news well and started questioning whether the baby was actually his son or Ken, who's Shauna's husband. Shauna assured him that Ken had undergone a vasectomy after their second child, ruling out the possibility of Ken being the father. Appreciating the dire consequences Heather would face if she found out about the pregnancy, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and desperately sought a solution with Shauna's consent. He convinced her to terminate the pregnancy and drove her to the clinic. Months and years went by, with Heather still unaware of her husband's affair with Shauna. However, as time passed, Shauna grew impatient and decided to confront Heather. One day, she followed Heather to the grocery store, accompanied by her friend Michelle Moore. Shauna and Michelle discreetly followed Heather around the store, observing her every move. Heather, still oblivious to their presence, engaged in a phone conversation with a friend. Shauna confronted Heather in a store, insulting and accusing her in a vicious outburst. The verbal attack left Heather deeply disturbed. Recognizing Shauna from her husband Ignacio's work Christmas parties, Heather decided to talk to him about the incident, as she knew Shauna was his co-worker at the police department. Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly, would suddenly lash out at her. Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but assured Heather she had nothing to worry about. He promised to tell Shauna to leave Heather alone, and he did confront her, but Shauna became furious with him. Despite this, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One time, Shauna showed up at Heather and Ignacio's home, demanding to see Ignacio. Heather couldn't shake the feeling that there might be more to her husband's relationship with Shauna than she knew. Shauna confided in a supervisor at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her deep feelings for him and stating that she loved him more than anyone else she had ever met. However, Shauna expressed frustration that Ignacio's wife, Heather, was an obstacle to their relationship. According to the supervisor, Shauna revealed that she would visit the shooting range to vent her frustrations, where she would imagine the targets were Heather. Although Shauna and Ignacio had been having an affair for years, Ken, Shauna's husband, remained unaware of the situation until he stumbled upon Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. Despite his discovery, Ken chose not to leave Shauna, opting instead to stay together for the sake of their children. Ignacio was involved with multiple women, including Shauna, who was aware of his relationship with another woman. This knowledge drove Shauna to be possessive and controlling, determined to remain the primary woman in his life. She blackmailingly threatened to reveal everything to Heather if he ever considered leaving her. Shauna's fixation on Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she took a drastic step to cement her position in his life by getting a tattoo of his family name on her leg. Shauna's fixation on Ignacio had become unhealthy and eventually turned into stalking. Whenever Ignacio went to a restaurant with his partner Heather and their daughter Victoria, Shauna would deliberately show up with her own family. Ignacio found Shauna's behavior increasingly disturbing, yet he continued his affair with her despite this. Shauna discovered she was pregnant with Ignacio's baby for the second time. She informed him that she had no intention of terminating the pregnancy, as she wanted to keep the baby. In March 2006, Shauna gave birth to a son, Christian, who was fathered by Ignacio. At the time, Shauna was still married to Ken, and Ignacio's wife, Heather, was unaware that he had a child with his co-worker. In the summer of 2006, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own, on the condition that Shauna would remain married to him, and she accepted this proposal. Heather was blindsided when a woman approached her with devastating news. Shauna Nelson had given birth to Oso's baby. This revelation left Heather stunned and confused. When she returned home, she confronted Ignacio about the child, demanding the truth. However, Ignacio lied to her, covering up his affair with Shauna, and Heather chose to believe him. In December 2006, Heather discovered Ignacio was missing one night. When he finally returned, she confronted him again. This time, Ignacio decided to come clean, revealing he had been with Shauna that night and confessing to a long-term affair. He also disclosed that Shauna had been pregnant twice, resulting in the recent birth of his son. After Ignacio's confession, Heather followed through on her threat to end their relationship if he cheated. She kicked him out of the house, but her strong desire to keep her family together led her to reconsider and call him back the next day. Despite her initial anger and disbelief, Heather didn't want to break up the family and feared the impact on their daughter Victoria. Heather told Ignacio she knew he was in love with her and that she felt the same way. She said she wanted to keep their marriage together and didn't plan to file for divorce. However, she made it clear she wasn't ready to just go back to how things were right away. Instead, she gave him some conditions to meet before she'd consider taking him back. First, Ignacio had to get tested for STDs. Heather also suggested he see a counselor, thinking it would help them work through the tough parts of fixing their marriage and dealing with the underlying issues that led to him cheating. Additionally, Heather asked Ignacio to give up his rights as a father to Shauna's baby. And lastly, she wanted him to end things with Shauna altogether. Ignacio was desperate to save his marriage and agreed to all of Heather's conditions. He knew he'd hurt her and was willing to make things right. Ignacio called Shauna to break the news, with Heather standing nearby and listening to the whole conversation. Moments after Ignacio ended their phone call, Heather received a text message on her cell phone. The message included a photo of Shauna and Ignacio's son, accompanied by the words, "IGS flesh and blood." Shauna was enraged, still seething from Ignacio's decision to end their relationship and stay with Heather. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, her anger intensified. As a result, Shauna started openly discussing her plans to sue Ignacio for child support, seeking financial compensation for their son, Christian. By early 2007, Ignacio and Heather were working to salvage their marriage, which had been damaged by Ignacio's infidelity. Despite the obstacles, they were committed to repairing their relationship and moving forward. However, Shauna, Ignacio's former mistress, refused to let go and continued to torment Heather. The situation became so unbearable that Ignacio and Heather had to take extreme precautions to safeguard their family and property. They started parking Heather's car in the garage rather than on the street to prevent Shauna from vandalizing it. Moreover, they sought legal help and had their lawyer serve Shauna with a formal warning, instructing her to leave Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter Victoria alone. The warning explicitly stated that she must stop harassing and intimidating them. Shauna ignored the warnings and consequences, continuing to harass Heather through various methods, including text messages, emails, and voicemails, using abusive and hurtful language. On January 23, 2007, at around 6 p.m., Heather was leaving her job at the credit union, looking forward to spending the evening at home with her daughter. But her peaceful night was abruptly shattered as she exited the building with her colleagues. In the dimly lit parking lot, where they were preparing to leave in their vehicles, the group was suddenly confronted by an individual dressed in black, wearing a Halloween mask and wielding a gun. The gunman deliberately targeted Heather, while others in the group tried to hide. He pointed his weapon at her head and ordered her to kneel. Before pulling the trigger, he told her, "You ruined my life," and then shot her twice in the head at point-blank range in an execution-style killing. The gunman fled the scene in a nearby red pickup truck. As Heather lay dying, her co-workers and other witnesses in the parking lot called 911. Paramedics rushed to the scene but were unable to save her life. The gunshot wounds to her head proved fatal, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. When the police arrived to secure the crime scene, they realized the victim was Heather, the wife of their co-worker Oso. They contacted Ignacio, telling him to rush to the hospital. Ignacio rushed through the hospital corridors to reach Heather's trauma room, but a doctor intercepted him with devastating news. It was too late, and Heather had already passed away. The news about his wife's death hit Ignacio hard. He knew he had to break the devastating news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult thing Ignacio ever had to do. He and Victoria spent a long time sitting together, hugging and crying uncontrollably. Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness reported seeing the shooter suddenly appear and then quickly disappear in a red pickup truck. Another witness thought the shooter might have been a woman based on the way they ran. During the investigation, the police focused on a suspect named Shauna Nelson, who had been mentioned in connection with Heather's harassment. Someone who knew about Oso's affair suggested that Shauna might have been responsible for Heather's shooting. The police officers at the crime scene were already familiar with Shauna, as she was a police dispatcher, and her husband, Ken, who was also a police officer. They also knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one the shooter was driving. With the evidence against Shauna growing, the police put out an all-points bulletin on the radio, looking for her in the red pickup truck they believed she was driving. That night, Shauna's husband, Ken Nelson, was on patrol in his police car when he heard the alert about his wife and her vehicle. He immediately started searching for her and found her driving his car near their home within 20 minutes. When Ken stopped her, Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken became suspicious because she was not wearing shoes, despite it being January in Colorado. What really caught his attention, however, was that she was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. After stopping her, Ken called in the sighting and asked for backup. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The investigation into Heather's murder began to focus on whether Shauna was involved. The authorities found a pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA on them, less than 1,000 feet from the crime scene. Moreover, they recovered 2 shell casings from a .40 caliber Glock Model 22, the same type of gun used by Ken in his work. This discovery further strengthened the case against Shauna. The investigators discovered a Halloween mask, similar to the one worn by the suspect in Heather's shooting, hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. A fully drawn bathtub was found at Shauna's home during a search, leading some to suspect that she may have been planning to clean herself of any blood spatter after the shooting. After her arrest, Shauna underwent thorough testing, including swabbing her clothing and hands for gunshot residue. The test results were positive, leading to her being charged with first-degree murder, although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather. Heather's husband, Ken Nelson, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Because Ken didn't detain Shauna after the murder, he was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to first-degree murder. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed that she had gone out to run errands and had worn her husband Ken's clothes from the laundry basket, which explained why she was dressed in his clothing. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied having any knowledge of or involvement in the crime. Another situation, Ignacio, was also extensively questioned, but was cleared of all suspicion in February 2008. Shauna's trial for the murder of Heather Gauss began, with Shauna pleading not guilty. The prosecution argued that Ignacio was not the first married officer with whom Shauna had an affair, and that her obsession with Ignacio was the motive behind Heather's murder. The prosecution made a deal with Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, who had often accompanied Shauna when she publicly taunted Heather Garris. Michelle agreed to testify against Shauna in exchange for a reduced sentence, and she revealed how much Shauna hated Heather Gauss, even admitting to having helped plan her murder. During the trial, Shauna testified in her own defense, denying all accusations against her. She vigorously denied ever telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather Gose or imagined her during target practice. She also denied any involvement in Heather's actual murder, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. Shauna proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that her best friend Michelle was obsessed with her and wanted to make her happy by getting rid of Heather. However, when Michelle took the stand as a witness, she contradicted Shauna's claims under cross-examination. The prosecution alleged that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the murder. According to the prosecution, the goal was to eliminate Heather, Oso's wife, and Ken, Shauna's husband, so that Shauna and Ignacio could live together freely. After deliberating for 5 hours, the jury returned a verdict, finding Shauna and Nelson guilty of first-degree murder. The judge addressed Shauna, stating that she deserved every day of her sentence. Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, received a 9-year prison sentence for her role in planning Heather's murder after testifying against Shauna. Following Shauna's murder conviction, Ken Nelson resigned from the police department, filed for divorce, and moved out of state with his children, including Shauna's son Christian, whose father is Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children would be allowed to visit Shauna in prison, despite the circumstances. Ken remained convinced that Shauna was a loving and great mother, regardless of her actions. The charges against Ken were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, believing that justice has been served. They hope Shauna will reflect on the suffering she caused Heather and her family every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish actions led to Heather's death, depriving her daughter Victoria of her mother. Tragically, Victoria died in a car accident in 2015 at the age of 17, losing control of her vehicle and striking a tree. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings, with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of 2, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend JN were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, JN forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The four of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kason brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kason was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend against Dr. Burchard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Hannah Potts. Hannah Potts, a 23-year-old woman, vanished, prompting a high-profile FBI investigation that garnered widespread media attention. The mysterious disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, leaving Hannah's family stunned and unsure of who would ultimately be charged. Hannah lived with her large family on a small farm in Gibson County, Indiana, an area dominated by agriculture. Her parents believed their farm was a safe and idyllic place to raise their children. On the night of July 24, 2020, Hannah struggled to sleep. She confided in her mother that she was going to take a walk around the farm, check on the animals, and possibly capture some photos. With her phone and camera in hand, she exited the house and headed towards the barn. The next morning, Hannah's family awoke to find her missing, only to be met with a distressing video posted on her Facebook page. In the video, Hannah desperately appealed to her mother for help, claiming that an unknown individual had grabbed her and was holding her captive in a room with 4 walls and minimal lighting. The FBI got involved, and the video rapidly spread on social media. The massive media and social media coverage helped attract a large number of volunteers who, together with the Potts family, handed out thousands of flyers about Hannah's disappearance. Hannah's twin sister Lauren posted on social media, calling for help and asking anyone with information to contact the Princeton, Indiana Police Department. When the FBI attempted to track Hannah's cell phone, they discovered that a cell tower near the Potts family home, about a couple of miles away, had received a signal from her phone on the day of her abduction. This indicated that Hannah was being held captive in a room close to her family's home. Police were searching for a man in a maroon car in connection with Hannah's disappearance, but they couldn't find anyone matching that description within a 5-mile radius of the Potts family home. However, during the investigation, detectives discovered that Hannah had been in close contact with 34-year-old Maria Hopper, who lived just a mile from the Potts' home before she vanished. When investigators questioned Maria, she admitted knowing Hannah, but claimed she had last seen her a few days before the abduction. Although this seemed like another dead end, new evidence came to light when police received a report from a cell phone carrier and gained access to Hannah's social media page, where she had posted a heartbreaking plea. This revealed that Maria had lied about seeing Hannah a few days before the abduction. Hannah disappeared in the early morning hours of July 24th. 2 days later, on the morning of July 26th, several police officers visited Maria Hopper's home. Maria again denied knowing anything about Hannah's whereabouts. Her boyfriend, 45-year-old Joshua Thomas, was also present and claimed he didn't know Hannah at all. When officers asked to search the house, Maria reluctantly gave her consent, but immediately stated that Hannah was not hiding in her house. The police didn't find anything suspicious inside the house, except for the stairs in the kitchen that led to the basement. Maria claimed that the basement only contained unnecessary items, but the law officials wanted to see it for themselves. As they searched through the dusty items in the basement, the police noticed a sheet of plywood that stood out from everything else. It was dust-free and seemed newer than the other items. The plywood appeared to be blocking access to another part of the basement. As one of the officers started to move it, Maria Hopper made a significant announcement. The recording Hannah made when it was shared on social media. Many people immediately found her behavior in the video strange and illogical. For instance, she recorded a 6-minute video which raised questions about why she didn't call 911 instead of wasting time recording. Moreover, it's unclear why the alleged kidnapper didn't search her and take away her phone. What was the purpose of taking pictures at the farm at 2 a.m. while recording the message? Initially, Hannah claimed she was kidnapped by a single man, but later in the video, she refers to they, implying multiple kidnappers. Although she had internet access at the location where she was being held, allowing her to potentially share her location, she failed to do so. The authorities were aware of the unusual circumstances surrounding Hannah's disappearance, but they couldn't jump to conclusions because people react differently under stress. So, the investigation continued, with her disappearance being treated as a potential kidnapping until proven otherwise. The truth finally came to light when the police gained access to Hannah and Maria Hopper's private messages. When an officer inspected Maria's house, he noticed a suspicious sheet of plywood in the basement. Maria confessed that Hannah was hiding behind it. The officer instructed her to come forward, and when Hannah emerged, he saw that she was wearing fully functional handcuffs on her right wrist and shackles on her ankles. Hannah immediately admitted to the police that she had not been kidnapped and was in the basement voluntarily. Further investigation revealed that Hannah had orchestrated her own kidnapping with the help of Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas. Their social media correspondence told a fantastical story, according to the police arrest records, with messages that read like a work of fiction. Hannah, Maria, and Joshua were taken to the police station for questioning about Hannah's reported kidnapping. The main puzzle was why Hannah would stage her own kidnapping. Hannah explained to the investigators that she was writing a book and wanted to experience the feelings of a kidnapped person to gain inspiration. To make her story more realistic, Maria and Joshua, characters in her book, helped her stage the kidnapping. They kept her captive in their basement, provided her with food and drinks, and destroyed her cell phone to prevent the police from tracing it. The distressing video Hannah posted on Facebook was pre-recorded and rehearsed for about a week before posting. None of her family members were aware of her plan. After the truth came out, the Potts family apologized to those who had participated in the search and were worried about Hannah. Hannah's sister, Brittany, wrote a public apology on social media, expressing her outrage and hurt over Hannah's actions, particularly the fact that she had tried to pin the blame on a person of color. Brittany disowned Hannah and hoped she would face the full force of the law for causing such suffering to their family and others. Hannah Potts wrote in her personal journal, kept in a friend's basement, that she knew her social media post would go viral. However, the post led to her being charged with falsely reporting a kidnapping. The prosecutor argued that Potts' actions were criminal because they caused unnecessary fear about her safety among her family and community. Moreover, her false description of the supposed abductor put innocent people in harm's way. The prosecutor also stressed that the significant time and resources wasted by multiple law enforcement agencies during a period of limited resources could not be recovered. Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas faced charges for perjury and covering up the hoax. Maria confessed to picking up Potts from her house and lying about hiding her. Thomas admitted to knowing about the fake kidnapping and hiding Hannah in their home. In September 2020, Hannah Potts admitted to fabricating a kidnapping story and was sentenced to a year's probation and 120 hours of community service. Joshua Thomas and Maria Hopper also received probation sentences. It is widely believed that Hannah's motives went beyond seeking inspiration for her book. She also aimed to generate buzz around herself, creating a platform to boost her book's sales. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in the city of Allamont Springs, Florida. She had an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father worked as a construction worker, often traveling to other states for several days, leaving the kids alone with their mother. Jessica was a cheerful and lovely child. She liked to spend a lot of time outdoors with friends, play with her siblings, and she also had a deep love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That day, her father went to the store to buy some items for the holiday, while her mother stayed in their apartment, packing for the upcoming trip. Jessica returned home from school with other children and asked her mother if she could go to the yard. She wanted to wait for her father, who was expected to return from the store soon. Her mother agreed and told her daughter not to go anywhere else. Their apartment complex was situated away from the main road, surrounded by trees, and the mother felt relatively secure about Jessica's safety. All the neighborhood children, including Jessica, always played there without constant adult supervision, and everything had been fine. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., her father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised, as her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he claimed she wasn't there. The parents went outside and searched the entire yard, but they couldn't find Jessica. Frustrated, they decided to check with neighbors, hoping someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor mentioned seeing Jessica in the yard earlier. She was sitting on a bench and reading a book, but that didn't help the worried parents find her. As darkness fell and their daughter remained missing, they decided to call the police. Officers arrived in a few minutes, initiated a search, and started interviewing neighbors. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find Jessica, so the police expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, an unexpected call came into the police station. The caller provided sparse details, but the police raced to the pumping station, finding Jessica's body hidden nearby in a trash bag, mere yards from the road, but obscured by the bridge's location. Personal effects by the corpse suggested the tragic circumstances. Meanwhile, the investigators focused on tracing the 911 call. It was evident that the call came from the murderer, and the police hoped it could help identify them. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public payphone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the officers arrived, the perpetrator had already vanished. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was a challenge. It was a public payphone, so there might be multiple prints. Moreover, investigators realized that the criminal had likely wiped the phone after the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere, and her body was transported to the water pumping station. Traces on the ground in front of the facility indicated that the killer likely pulled the body from a vehicle in a trash bag and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothing was intact, except for one shoe. Police couldn't find it in the bag or in the surrounding area. The only lead found at the crime scene was the tire track on the ground. Police couldn't be certain it belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed it and made a cast. Medical experts examined the body and determined that the victim died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It seemed the killer had used their bare hands. A partially digested hamburger was found in her stomach, which she had consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother stated that she had not provided Jessica with any such food that day, leading the police to believe that the meal was provided by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the motive of the perpetrator entirely unclear. Initially, the police began to consider Jessica's parents as suspects, as neither of them had a solid alibi. At the time of Jessica's disappearance, her mother claimed she was packing in the apartment, and the father was shopping. Theoretically, they both had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police tried to understand how the killer managed to take Jessica from her complex's yard without anyone noticing or Jessica screaming. This led them to believe that the perpetrator likely knew the victim well, and she left with him willingly. Another supporting factor was the tone of the killer's voice during the 911 call. Despite the experts' efforts to clean up the recording, they noticed sorrow and regret in the killer's voice, as if they genuinely regretted committing the murder. The fact that the killer took the risk of calling 911 spoke volumes. The perpetrator could have done it either for the thrill of playing with the police and manipulating the investigation, or they genuinely regretted their actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. Considering the caller's evident sadness, investigators leaned towards the second option. Police inspected Jessica's father's car, finding something intriguing in the trunk. There was a roll of black trash bags similar to the one containing the victim's body. However, an expert examining the bag from the crime scene quickly determined it differed from those found in the father's car, clearly belonging to a different roll. So the man was temporarily ruled out as a suspect, and investigators shifted their focus to others. Forensic experts carefully examined the victim's clothing and body for potential clues, uncovering a few leads. They discovered a substantial amount of dog hair, despite the fact that Jessica's family did not own a dog, suggesting the animal belonged to the killer. Additionally, they found human hair on her body belonging to an unknown white male. However, the experts required a few days to extract the DNA profile. Two types of foreign fibers were also discovered on Jessica's clothes. Through analysis of their structure, the experts concluded that one likely came from a car seat cover and the other from a carpet, further supporting the theory that the victim was killed elsewhere and transported to the water pumping station by car. Regarding the dog hair found on Jessica's clothing, experts attempted to determine the breed using the FBI's database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from various dog breeds. This database has been helpful in criminal cases where dog hair could be crucial evidence. Experts compared the hair sample with the database, ruling out one breed after another. Ultimately, they concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes belonged to a Shar-Pei. It appears the killer owned a Shar-Pei, and the hair ended up on Jessica's clothes, either in the perpetrator's vehicle or at their residence. According to the preliminary theory of investigators, the killer somehow might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger and then brought her to his home and murdered her. Meanwhile, the experts attempted to enhance the phone call recording, but it proved to be a challenging task. They decided to try a different approach and sought assistance from NASA. NASA had advanced tools for clearing audio recordings, originally designed to enhance recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality audio track. However, the experts still needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare it with the call recording and establish a match. Based on the detectives' assumption that the killer might have known Jessica, they decided to play the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize it. She listened to it for the first time and said that the voice sounded familiar, but the mother couldn't remember whose voice it is. However, during a second attempt, it clicked. She recognized the voice as their neighbor who lived in the same complex, although she couldn't remember his name. She told the detectives that the man often walked his Shar-Pei in the yard. Police swiftly identified the man as 35-year-old James Crow. During the initial hours of Jessica's disappearance, investigators had already questioned him along with other neighbors. He mentioned that he saw her in the yard while walking his dog, and they spoke briefly before he left. Detectives dug into his background and found that Crow had no criminal history. He lived with his wife, who was a nurse. The man was a former truck driver, currently unemployed, and he spent most of his time strolling the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that merely the similarity in voice and owning a dog of a specific breed wasn't enough for an arrest, so they obtained a search warrant for his car. They discovered two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, there was an empty Happy Meal bag, even though Jessica had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach and James didn't have children. This seemed highly suspicious. Experts also noticed that the car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. Police found out that Crow replaced them on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not particularly old and could have lasted for several more years. Crow claimed to have left the old tires at a car service, which was quite unusual considering they were not old at all. So the police headed to this service building, but by the time they arrived, there was only one tire from James's car left. They compared its tread pattern from what was found near the body, but detectives faced an unexpected twist. They didn't match. However, they initially weren't 100% sure that the tire mark on the ground was left by the killer's car and not some other vehicle, as maintenance staff regularly visited the building, and this tire mark could have belonged to their vehicle. The police also searched James's apartment, where they found a new lead, a box containing several rolls of trash bags matching the size and color of the one found on the victim's body. Obviously, this couldn't be considered strong evidence, so detectives had to figure out if there was a way to establish that the bags had come from the same roll. At first glance, this task seemed impossible. The bags themselves had no markings or distinctive features, and there were hundreds of manufacturers of such products. But even the detectives were soon surprised by the creativity they could display in such a complex challenge. They contacted N.L. Roberts, the man responsible for quality control at the company that produced the bags found in the suspect's apartment. At first, he identified the specific factory where the bags were produced, as there was a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls, indicating that the product was made at a facility in Virginia. The expert then explained that a tiny amount of iron or titanium is included in the composition of the bags, depending on their color. Considering that the factory produces bags of various colors, the materials in the production are constantly changing, and the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium literally changes daily, since such tiny amounts cannot be measured with 100% accuracy, and there's no need to do that. In other words, experts could take bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, measure the presence of the elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays, and get a very precise ratio. Through this analysis, they found that the ratio of iron and titanium to plastic in both bags was absolutely identical, indicating that they were manufactured on the same day and should belong to the same batch. But that's not all. During the production of trash bags, a small amount of microscopic debris ends up on the machines, which is acceptable within production standards. However, this results in small streaks visible to the naked eye when the plastic sheets later cut into bags are rolled out. These streaks are present on every bag in large amounts, forming a unique pattern for each roll of fabric. The debris particles on the conveyor belt are constantly moving, falling off and being replaced by new ones, so the pattern of similar streaks is preserved for a maximum of a few hundred feet of fabric. This means that it can be understood from this pattern that two different bags were not just made within the same batch, but within a few hours of each other. Experts compared the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, and the lines on them matched with astonishing precision. But that's not all. The experts also explained that after the bags are manufactured, they are rolled into a bundle using a machine, which often does this somewhat unevenly. However, if you don't look closely, these deviations are almost imperceptible and the rolls appear smooth. Examining the edges of the bags, however, reveals tiny folds and creases, forming a similarly unique pattern as with the streaks. In the end, the experts compared the bags again and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched the one from the crime scene. They concluded that the bag used by the killer was not just produced by the same company, but was manufactured within a range of almost 17 boxes apart. This meant that with a high degree of probability, the perpetrator took the bag from one of the rolls in James's apartment. Forensic analysts also compared the two types of fibers found on Jessica's clothing with the carpet in the suspect's apartment and the covers of his car seats. Both samples matched. Finally, a sound expert compared the 911 call recording with a voice sample from James and concluded that the voice belonged to the same person. Despite the incredible work done by the experts, detectives faced one major problem. All this fell into the realm of circumstantial evidence, but they were confident in James's involvement and decided to arrest him. The man was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intent to seek the death penalty. Considering that James continued to deny his guilt, the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented their version of how the crime happened. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. According to the police version, on that day, James noticed Jessica alone on a bench while walking his dog and started a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After the restaurant, he presumably took her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his place. Perhaps he offered her to play with Pumpkin, his dog. His wife was at work, and the presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes indicated that she was there on the day of her death. According to investigators, James might have attempted to assault Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the forensic report, the perpetrator not only strangled the victim with his bare hands, but also pressed his palm against her face, perhaps because Jessica tried to scream, and he panicked and attacked her. After Jessica passed away, he placed her in a garbage bag to transport the body to his car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. He drove a few miles and left the body near a water station, made the 911 call from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's lawyers attempted to challenge all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid proof of their client's guilt. Despite the fact that the judge accepted the evidence, the defense was right. In cases involving the death penalty, the standards for evidence are much higher, and in James' case, there was a significant chance of avoiding this sentence. In light of these circumstances, a plea deal was proposed to the suspect. Under the terms of the deal, he would admit guilt to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. He wasn't required to disclose any details of the crime, but he mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family and save them from going through the trial. The prosecution believed that the perpetrator genuinely showed remorse, citing his 911 call, the purpose of which remained unclear. The only logical explanation in this context was that James sincerely wanted to alleviate his guilt for such a heinous crime. Jessica's parents were not pleased with the deal, as they had hoped for the death penalty, and they also wanted the killer to confess. But James remained silent. Nevertheless, he didn't live to see the end of his term. James passed away in November 2011 at the age of 49 due to health problems, taking the details of his actions and motives with him to the grave. Jessica's case involved truly unique work by experts and detectives. The amount of information they gathered by examining ordinary garbage bags astonished even the judge, who had never encountered such evidence throughout his career. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Chambers. On December 6, 2014, at 8:09 p.m., emergency services received a report of a vehicle fire on a rural road. The first firefighters to arrive on the scene found a blazing Kia and began extinguishing the flames immediately. Inside the car was a hellish scene with black smoke billowing upwards rapidly. As the rescuers doused the vehicle with foam, they noticed a dark figure slowly emerging from the nearby underbrush, a silhouette that resembled either a young woman or a child. The victim was severely burned and looked like she had been through an ordeal beyond imagination. As this figure approached, it became clear that it was a young woman dressed only in her underwear and covered in burns from head to toe. She asked for help. Her clothes had been incinerated. Her hair had turned into charred lumps of ash, and her face was blackened. A firefighter wrapped her blistered body in a blanket and laid her on the ground as they awaited emergency medical services, EMS. They did not leave her side even for a moment. Barely moving her lips, she tried uttering individual words which were indiscernible due to her condition. However, several emergency responders managed to make out names like Eric or Derek when asked who had assaulted her. She was promptly airlifted from this small rural town to a hospital in Memphis for immediate medical attention. After suffering severe burns covering about 93% of her body, the young woman, Jessica Lane Chambers, tragically passed away 4 hours later. Jessica Chambers, 19 years old, grew up living with her mother across the street from her grandmother, while her father and stepmother resided further down the street. Despite her petite and fragile appearance, she had a determined character. Her father had a history of legal issues, having pleaded guilty to manufacturing methamphetamine and being arrested for driving under the influence in the early 2000s. Growing up amidst such challenges, Jessica did not fit the mold of a quiet girl. She smoked, had frequent conflicts with her parents, maintained unstable relationships with boyfriends. Jessica's behavior became more concerning at 17 after the tragic death of her older brother Alan in a car accident in 2012. Following this tragedy, she moved out of her mother's home for several months. Her childhood was fraught with challenges. Her father even spent time in prison, but had been released by 2014 and was working as a mechanic at the local sheriff's department. Jessica sometimes engaged in unlawful activities, occasionally selling illegal substances and associating with local gangs. However, despite these transgressions, she maintained a reputation for being sweet and kind-hearted, earning respect and affection from almost everyone who knew her. The manner of Jessica's death intensely shocked her small hometown. Rapidly spreading rumors suggested that it involved a deliberate car fire incident. Given her father's position within the sheriff's department, he was quickly informed about the nearby car fire and his daughter's involvement. Following this devastating news, his wife rushed down the street to inform Jessica's mother about the tragedy. Initially, authorities thought the fire resulted from a car accident. Yet, this theory was quickly ruled out. No sign of emergency braking or any other obstacles were found at the scene. An examination of the burned vehicle also showed no signs of impact or damage. The theory then turned to arson. But at the time of the incident, police had few clues. The lack of evidence has prolonged the investigation. Investigators have investigated nearly everyone who may have come into contact with Jessica during her final days. They even investigated whether her boyfriend, who was in prison at the time, could have ordered her murder. However, this theory was dismissed because he has been living in Iowa since their breakup. Ali Alai, the owner of a gas station and one of the last people to see Jessica alive, also came under suspicion. He gave his statement and was released afterward. There was another theory that Jessica had brought trouble upon herself by associating with a local gang. However, gang members denied their involvement and expressed their condolences to the Chambers family. After some time, investigators reconstructed the last week of Jessica's life almost minute by minute up until her tragic end on December 5, 2014. Jessica received a call on her cell phone that day and drove to the M&M Mini Mart following a call from a friend. She bought $14 worth of gasoline and left in her car at 5:15 p.m. Around 5:45 p.m., she called her mother to say she would return in a little while. Her hair was pulled back in a bun, and she was dressed in camouflage pajama pants. Jessica made a few more stops, one at an unknown house and another in the nearest town, before arriving at the scene of her demise. She was possibly already accompanied in her car by the person who would end her life. Surveillance cameras caught a man in a striped shirt refueling a gas can before heading in the same direction as Jessica. However, there were no confirming data about his further movements. Cell phone records showed she spent about 10 to 15 minutes near a traffic light on Highway 6 heading towards Batesville. The subsequent 62 minutes between 6:30 p.m. and 7:32 p.m., also known as the mystery hour, took time to unravel. At 7:30 p.m., Jessica's phone indicated that she reached the location on Heron Road, where her burning car was later found. So where did Jessica Chambers go, and what led to her brutal fate? The investigation progressed slowly. In December 2015, during a case involving charges of illegal possession of weapons, controlled substances, and counterfeits, 17 suspected gang members were arrested. District Attorney John Champion did not expect any of these gang members to be directly linked to the burning incident involving Jessica Chambers. However, during plea negotiations, all gang members were offered the opportunity to assist with the investigation. Thus, the gang members pointed to a certain Quentin Tellis. Investigators finally learned who Jessica was within an hour before the fire. But in February 2016, authorities announced a pause in the case to conduct a more detailed investigation and establish a motive. The investigation became particularly interested in Quentin Tellis after revisiting social media and examining Jessica's cell phone. They identified whom she had been communicating with in the last hours of her life. During the first interrogation, 29-year-old Quentin Tellis recounted that their meeting, which had been arranged by text message, was the only time they met, and he did not know her well. He merely asked for a ride home. With more comprehensive information and all messages presented, Tellis was arrested on charges related to ending Jessica Chambers' life through arson. Text messages revealed that Tellis repeatedly requested from Jessica very intimate engagements on the day of the tragedy. That morning at 9:02 a.m., Jessica texted Quentin to say she had just woken up. He replied a few minutes later that he also had just woken up. At 10:09 a.m., Tellis texted Chambers saying, "I'm ready." Shortly after this exchange, she stopped at the M&M gas station where she was captured on surveillance footage leaving the premises. A few minutes later, they presumably picked up Tellis. Subsequently, around 10:49 a.m., they collected one of Jessica's friends. Later, at approximately 2:03 p.m., Jessica dropped Quentin off. Tellis then began messaging Jessica again. This time he explicitly asked for some affection. This was the fourth message in 4 days where he requested intimacy via text. Other deleted texts were recovered, including messages like, "I'm excited," and "Come lie with me," which Jessica did not answer. The passenger seat in Jessica Chambers' burned car was pushed back, a typical position for intimate activities in a vehicle. Prosecutors argued that this indicated the two were engaged in or attempting intimacy that evening. On February 24th, Tellis was charged with the murder of Jessica and arson. The investigation took considerable time to build the case. The first trial in the Jessica Chambers case commenced in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi. Investigators stated that Jessica met Quentin Tellis around Thanksgiving in November 2014. He was 7 years her senior and had attended the same high school before she enrolled there. In October of that same year, he had been released from prison after serving time for burglary. FBI agent Dustin Blount testified during the first trial that he met Jessica through a friend at a gas station in Cortland, Mississippi. They spent a lot of time driving around together on multiple occasions. He even stated they had been intimate. Blount provided further details. The passenger seat was reclined back, and he was sitting there with Jessica on him. In court, John Champion mentioned a series of text messages between them on the day she died, requesting intimacy. The front seat in the burned car was adjusted downward, as Tellis had described during their previous encounter. Champion claimed that Tellis attempted to end her life by strangulation before proceeding to set the car ablaze. Jessica was found deceased after being doused with gasoline and set on fire. A friend of Jessica testified that the three of them had ridden in Jessica's car the day before the incident. Later, Tellis confessed to investigators that he saw Jessica that night, and they went to a fast food restaurant together. Various friends, who he claimed to have been with when the fire started, could not confirm his alibi. Tellis appeared on a store surveillance camera several miles away, where he was purchasing a phone card for a friend who lived in Louisiana. He did not testify in his own defense at the trial. A central element of the defense was that several emergency responders at the scene reported hearing Jessica utter the name Eric or Derek. Ultimately, 2 jurors noted that Quentin's name sounded nothing like Eric or Derek. Panola County District Attorney John Champion pointed to text messages in which Tellis repeatedly requested intimacy from Chambers. Champion testified at the first trial that there was a series of text messages, even on the day of her death, where Quentin consistently asked Jessica for intimacy, and she consistently denied him. At the first trial, FBI agent Dustin Blount demonstrated that Tellis and Chambers met through a friend at a gas station in their small hometown of Cortland. They drove around together frequently, as recalled by agent Blount, who interrogated Tellis. He stated they had been intimate at some point. Agent Blount spoke with Tellis at his home 11 days after Jessica's passing and asked him to describe their intimate encounter and pinpoint where it occurred. Tellis indicated it happened in a driveway south of his house. Back in December 2014, Quentin Tellis shared a home with his mother in a trailer not far from the convenience store where Jessica Chambers was last seen before the fire. Tellis's DNA was discovered on Jessica's keys, and cell phone records indicated he was on that crucial night. Despite this evidence, Tellis has consistently asserted his innocence. Defense attorney Darla Palmer, during her opening statement, urged jurors to dismiss the cell phone location data. She argued it could not conclusively prove that Tellis and Chambers were at the same spot. Tellis has always insisted on his innocence, even telling police in an interrogation room, despite threats of capital punishment if tried, that he did not harm Jessica. Tellis's family argues that law enforcement is simply looking for someone to blame. The case has become highly charged and racially sensitive since Tellis, an African-American man, was arrested for the death of a white cheerleader like Jessica. Investigators sought connections to other recent fires across Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, but found no links. The first trial in 2017 concluded in a mistrial due to issues related to jury. While they stated that a guilty verdict must be unanimous, they did not explicitly mention the same for a not guilty verdict. Officials observed that since jurors couldn't unanimously agree on Tellis's guilt, they inferred his innocence. The second trial was particularly challenging. jurors were presented with a photograph of Jessica Chambers, taken by firefighter Cole upon his arrival at the scene. Cole explained that the image depicting Chambers with soot-blackened lips haunted him. "I see this photo every morning and every night," he shared the jury. A veteran firefighter related that he had never encountered a victim with such extensive burns before. He described finding the young woman lying on the ground, barely able to speak after having been deliberately set on fire. She was sitting on a blanket. Her hair was singed and stood around her nose and mouth, with blisters covering her body. Cole, who serves as the Panola County Director of Emergency Operations, informed the jurors, "I sat and held her hand. That's all I could do." Fighting back tears, firefighter Cole Haley recounted telling Chambers, "It's going to be okay," to which she replied, "I am going to die." At that point, Haley lay down beside her. He described how her skin was hanging from her lips and nose. Paramedic Bradley Dixon testified that her eyelashes and eyebrows were gone. The hair on her head was a warm, matted clump. Testimonies at this second hearing also included Sherry Flowers' account. She had not appeared at the first trial of Tellus, but had informed investigators during questioning that she picked up a hitchhiker on the night Jessica Chambers' life ended tragically. In court, Sherry Flowers did not recognize Tellus and agreed with the prosecutor that she did not know whom she had picked up. Despite not identifying Tellus in court, Sherry testified that a man flagged her down and she stopped because she thought it was her cousin. She agreed to give a ride to this individual, a young African-American male around 20 years old and of slim to medium build. Tellus, who stood 5'9" tall and was 26 at the time of the incident, somewhat fit this description. Initially, Flowers did not contact investigators. When asked why in court, she said she couldn't remember and thought it wasn't relevant to the case. Nevertheless, prosecutors attempted to link this ride to Jessica Chambers' demise by suggesting it provided Quintless the opportunity to leave Jessica's car in order to return later and set it on fire. However, Flowers admitted uncertainty about the exact time of ride, only stating, "I know I picked someone up." The investigator also noted that Jessica Chambers' keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near where she supposedly picked up the hitchhiker. The defense objected to the keys being admitted into evidence, arguing it was impossible to prove their location at the relevant time. During the retrial, jurors were required to visit crime scenes and hear additional testimonies. This second trial was highly emotional. Witnesses broke down on the stand. Spectators wept as photos of Jessica Chambers' burned abdomen and face were shown. One of the first responders tearfully testified and embraced her father after stepping down from the stand. In 2018, just like in the initial trial, this second jury failed to reach a verdict in Quentin Tellus's case. It marked the second time in 2 years that a jury was deadlocked over whether Tellus was responsible for setting Jessica and her car on fire. Despite being tried twice, no conviction was secured, and the case remains officially unsolved. One of the most discussed aspects of Jessica Chambers' case is what transpired between her leaving home and her tragic end. Reports state that Jessica left her house at 5 p.m. on the night of the crime, telling her mother she was going to a nearby gas station. Regrettably, Jessica's mother Lisa passed away on October 29, 2021, at age 52, without seeing justice served for her daughter. In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, the star of a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Verdejo Sanchez, shone brightly. He was called a diamond, one of the most promising athletes of his country. He was predicted to win titles and gold medals. Then it seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man will reach fantastic heights in sports. In 2021, the name of the boxer again traveled all the world's media, but this time fell into the section of criminal chronicles. This story is about a teenage attachment that grew into a kind of addiction and led to a terrible tragedy, and also about how the author of the main knockout of 2014, who was praised and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, almost received a death sentence, but eventually went to prison for life. It is noteworthy that despite the presence of irrefutable evidence and confessions of the boxer's accomplice, he himself to this day refuses to plead guilty. The future star of world boxing was born in the Puerto Rican city of San Juan in 1993 on May 19th. He grew up in a rather modest large family and from an early age was fond of port. True, in childhood, he planned to connect his life with baseball, but his further fate was determined by a funny incident. When the boy was 9 years old, a family friend came to visit them with his son of the same age. The boys were playing in the yard, but suddenly quarreled and a fight broke out. Parents separated the children, and the father of the future athlete noted that if he wants to fight with someone in the future, let him wear boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix, at his request, was taken to a local gym, where the boy, as he later admitted himself, from the first training session fell in love with boxing. At the age of 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he won his country's championship, and a year later, he went to the Olympic Games in London, where he reached the quarterfinals. In the same year began his brilliant career in the professional ring. In total, Verdejo had 29 fights, gaining 27 confident victories, and in 2014 he was recognized as the author of the best knockout in the fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he subsequently defended 6 more times in 2 years. Everyone who saw him in the fight had no doubt. This young man will write his name in the history of world boxing. And now let's get to know Keishla Rodriguez. The girl was born in November 1993 in San Juan. The full name given to her at birth is Keishla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, had another common daughter, Beralise Nicole, and also the couple raised Kayla's son, Jonathan, from a previous marriage of a woman. Keishla grew up an open and sociable girl. She did well in school and adored animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Her best friend was her sister Beralise, to whom she confided all her secrets and worries. Keishla studied in the same school with Felix Verdejo, who was her age. Young people were acquainted since childhood, and in adolescence between them began a romantic relationship. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced and separated. Kayla moved to relatives in Florida, and her daughters, who were by then already adults, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite the fact that each of the sisters had long since lived their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and told each other about everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer, who was already managed to take part in the Olympic Games, had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, the girl was only 14 years old, and she was still in school, but even then she made big plans for the future with a promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Elisa's parents were not at all against this relationship. Attractive and talented Felix, who has always had a lot of fans, becoming a boxing star, literally bathed in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to spin a novel or a passing affair on the side, and also, despite the serious relationship with Eliza, continued to meet with his school friend Keishla. Keishla's sister, Beralise, and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Eliza considered herself the only woman and great love of the athlete, was preparing for the wedding, and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Keishla knew that the lover has a fiancé, but at the same time, Felix did not let her go. On top of that, he was her first great love, and deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, the boxer did marry the young Eliza, who at that time was barely 19 years old. Eliza, by that time, was already quite a famous model, had tens of thousands of followers in social networks, and also opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. In August of the same year, just a few months after the wedding, the athlete got into a serious car accident when he was rushing on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, seriously feared that his talented charge would go off the rails at the height of his career. But Felix, contrary to the disappointing prognosis, made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, the boxer published in his profile in the social network a picture with Elise, who was in a large term of pregnancy. In the comment to the photo, he wrote, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." And a month later, he announced the birth of a daughter, who was given the name Miranda Verdejo Santiago. The young man in public looked like a loving husband, caring father, and an exemplary family man. But secretly from his wife, he continued to meet with Keishla, who could not let go. As Eliza later admitted, she guessed that her husband was cheating on her, but every time he tearfully vowed to leave his mistress. Keishla repeatedly tried to break off this painful relationship, but Felix would not let her go. She had no other men, because the boxer threatened that if he found out about the fact that Keishla had someone, not good for her and her chosen one, Keishla herself, who had fallen in love with Verdejo since high school, continued to love him despite everything. Rodriguez, as planned, connected her life with the care of animals and got a job at the Center of Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics. Colleagues described her as conscientious, hard-working, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, which she simply adored. In 2020, Eliza discovered the correspondence of her husband with several mistresses, including Keishla. The wife gave her husband a scandal and threw him out of the house, threatening that she would file for divorce and forbid him to see his daughter. Eliza's threats had an effect. In addition, in the career of the athlete at that time, there was a serious decline and unnecessary problems where he did not need. For a while, he really stopped seeing Rodriguez, but Felix still did not let her go, trying to control almost every step Keishla. After a few months of secret visits resumed, and in April 2021, Keishla discovered that she was pregnant. She bought a rapid test at the drugstore, which only confirmed her fears. She first called her sister, who was aware of her complicated relationship with the athlete, and told her everything. It was out of the question to have an abortion, because Keishla was already 27 years old, and she was ready to have a child, even if she had to raise it on her own. A few days later, Keishla broke the news to the father of her child, hoping in her heart that he would accept it, but Felix was not happy, to put it mildly. He got angry and told his mistress that she should go to the doctor, and if the pregnancy is confirmed, it will be necessary to have an abortion. Naturally, Rodriguez answered him with a firm refusal, but the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child will finally destroy his reputation, and this he cannot allow. After Keishla's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed, and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Keishla immediately get rid of the child, but she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Keishla a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her, because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and did not get in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend Luis Antonio Cadiz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him, but the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly and the police will never come out on them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward, and Luis agreed, with the support of an accomplice. Felix called Keishla and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Keishla called her sister back and told her everything. She still had hope that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion. But Berylise all this situation is quite alarmed. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister, and she was worried that he wouldn't do anything to her. Berylise called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together they could not dissuade Keishla from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Keishla immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Keishla, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then Felix suddenly hit Keishla in the head with his fist, from which she immediately lost consciousness. Until Keishla regained consciousness, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Keishla. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car, where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Keishla's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Keishla, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Keishla's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Keishla has always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Berenice had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now Berenice was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Keishla. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, and then reported to the police about her suspicions and threats to her sister. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Kayla didn't even want to think about the fact that Keishla was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers, but they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel, messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks with requests to respond to those who know anything about her fate or current whereabouts. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things, blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Keishla's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Keishla, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Keishla's disappearance, he was at home with his family. As there was nothing to charge him, Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who at the first interrogation admitted that she was aware of his affair with Keishla, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Keishla was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car traveling behind each other. But the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge, and for which he had an official permit. Also, a cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Keishla were in the same location on that fateful night. Keishla's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action, calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law, as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery, not in a traditional hearse, but in a white carriage, over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican natives, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures, have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased from the very beginning asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer, so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy, and with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. It was possible to reconstruct the chain of events of that night and the details of the crime, mainly thanks to the testimony of Luis, who did not deny his guilt. He admitted that it was he who, at the request of a friend, got the drug for injection and also brought a wire and a concrete block to get rid of the body. But Felix continued to insist on his non-involvement in the case, although his words could not seriously affect the situation. By the way, the wife of the boxer, who acted in court as a witness, almost immediately after the arrest of her husband filed for divorce and tried to abstract from what was happening, focusing on the development of his business and raising a young daughter. According to some reports, not so long ago, Elisa Santiago remarried. Elisa herself admitted in an interview that she repeatedly received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, as well as death wishes to her and even Miranda. Many considered it was the spouse of the athlete as the organizer of the crime, but no evidence was found. In the summer of 2023, it became known that the jury, having familiarized itself with all the evidence and heard the testimony of all the witnesses, was finally ready to announce the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice Luis Cadiz were found guilty on each of the charges against them. But despite this, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023. Most likely, both men involved in the deaths of Keishla Rodriguez and her unborn child will likely go to prison for life, with no right to ever leave prison.